you for coming back out this evening. And this is, as we've said, the review of 2016, part 2. And we're not going to, recap on everything we talked about last week, otherwise we'd be here all day. But remember, those were some of the things that we looked at. We specifically were looking at Russia, weren't we? Spent quite a bit of time looking at Russia, quite a bit of time looking at the impact of Brexit on Europe, potentially down the line, and we started looking at Donald Trump. But just one little thing. In fact, have you got your Bibles with you? I'm sort of conscious, perhaps last week we didn't really open them very much because of all the slides on the screen, all the words were on the screen. Have just a quick look at Daniel 11 verse 40, because this is the one small recap that I wanted to do just for a second, and you'll see why I want to in just a moment. So in Daniel 11, chapter 11 verse 40, I'll give you a second just to find that, but while you're finding it, you'll remember that these are the verses that are talking about the time of the end, and they're talking about the king of the south pushing at an individual person. Remember that? There it is, look in Daniel 11 verse 40, in the authorised version, it says, at the time of the end shall the king of the south, and who did we say the king of the south was? The US, us, it's the Tarshish powers based in Saudi Arabia, and that's why they're south. We'll look at that more in just a bit later on. So at the time of the end, these, America, Britain and so on, push at, that word means to goad. It means to wind up, really. It means to aggravate at him. And we said that him was the king that was mentioned, this individual man that is mentioned from verse 36 to 39. And this man, we said, was none other than Gog from Ezekiel chapter 38. It's the description of Gog. And so what we've got at the time of the end is the America, Britain, and the king, i.e. the king of the south, pushing at this individual. And what we said last time was, it's quite interesting, in the dying days of Obama's administration, that he appears to be sort of provoking Russia. Because what we said last Wednesday was, of course, that he had expelled 36 diplomats. Do you remember we said that? But I actually said something more. And here's what I said last week. I'll grab the recording. I'm not playing the whole thing. But here's a little bit of what I said last week. And so what Obama is doing on the back of the US elections is causing as much trouble as he possibly can. And of course, only a few days ago, 36 diplomats were expelled, weren't they, from America. And I'm absolutely convinced between now and the date that Obama leaves office, he will do something more to Putin personally. I actually think he will. That's what I said last Wednesday. He's going to do something more. There's going to be something that happens to Putin between Obama and Putin before the end of his administration. 2 days later, i.e. Friday last week, this was the headline news.
This review on Russia's cyber attacks has now been made public, saying the campaign was ordered directly by President Vladimir Putin. The nation's intelligence chiefs have now briefed Donald Trump, the president-elect, on the election attacks. Let's go to our political reporter, Sarah Murray, who's outside Trump Tower in New York. What are you learning, Sarah?
Well, Wolf, even after meeting with the heads of the nation's top spy agencies, Donald Trump cannot bring himself to blame Russia for these election-related cyber attacks. But as for the intelligence community, they say that they have high confidence. Not only did Russia try to interfere in the U.S. election, but that interference was ordered from the highest levels, from Russian President Vladimir Putin.
So lo and behold, 2 days later, and of course Obama is behind this, the intelligence committee don't just work on their own and call Trump to a meeting. Obama's hand is behind this. And so the intelligence committee pull Trump in and say Vladimir Putin is the man. It's not just Russia that's behind this, it came from him. And what I actually did was, I don't know if any of you have done this, but you can actually download and read the 25-page intelligence report on what America is saying about Vladimir Putin and Russia. And in this report, believe it or not, it's only 25 pages with quite a few spaces, it actually mentions Vladimir Putin by name 31 times. This whole report is just saying this is the man. Now, I've read quite a few books on Vladimir Putin, and sort of almost feel like I've got to know him to some extent by doing this, because these go through his whole history from birth to where we are now. And there's quite an interesting thing with this man. There's something that aggravates him more than anything else, and that is when people do not show him personally respect. That's why he became black belt with judo and so on, because he was a little guy, still is, and he was picked on. And so anybody that he doesn't care if you're enemies, he's quite happy to be your enemy. He doesn't really care if there's trust or not. He doesn't really care about that. He's quite happy to be America's enemy. But what he won't stand is where people are disrespectful of him and of Russia. He wants the world to respect Russia. He wants the world to respect him. He's got this ingrained thing. This is a major issue for Putin to be singled out and to be almost poked fun at as well during all of this. Donald Trump's reaction, well, I'll show you a little bit of his reaction that came out later on, earlier on this afternoon. But Trump accepts the US intelligence on Russia hacking, top aide says. You see, Trump is being backed into a serious corner on this now. So he's being presented by all these heavyweights saying, I know you want to be friends with Putin, but we're going to make it as difficult for you as we possibly can. We're going to throw every bit of mud at the wall before you get into power to make it increasingly difficult. And I know there's been even more allegations and bits and pieces that have been happening earlier on today with some false reports that have come out according to Trump. But this is what Trump said at his news conference around about 3 hours ago.
Now, I don't know that I'm going to get along with Vladimir Putin. I hope I do, but there's a good chance I won't. And if I don't, do you honestly believe that Hillary would be tougher on Putin than me? Does anybody in this room really believe that?
See? So you see where he's gone, where he's been forced to go. He started off by saying, over the last few months, he's going to be my best friend, we get on really well, to now saying, do you really, there's a good chance we might not get on? And do you really think that I'm not going to be tough on him? This is exactly where Obama was trying to push him. And now I'm not saying in Daniel 11 verse 40 that we have seen the total push here. What I'm saying though is, I think this could well be part of it. When God says the king of the south is going to goad, is going to push at, is going to provoke this individual, I certainly think we've seen some of that underway on the news over the last few days. Is there going to be more? Could there be more? Most certainly there could well be. But I think we're certainly seeing some of it happen right now in front of our very eyes. So that was the sort of recap from last week, if you like. And what we're going to do, if you think about last week, what we said was there's Russia, there's Europe, there's Britain, there's America. And what we're going to do this evening is focus more and more in until we get into Israel, in fact right into Jerusalem itself. And so what we're going to do is look at the nations that get closer in towards Israel. So the next nations in the circle, if you like, would be things like Turkey, things like countries like Iran, countries like Syria and Jordan. So we're focusing through. And we're going to look at some of these headlines. You remember the Turkish coup and so on and so forth. We'll look at those. And as I promised you last week, we'll conclude all of this with something that I think is quite interesting that points to 2017 as potentially being a hugely significant year. But I'll leave that with you. I'll run that past you towards the end of this. Now, what I thought we'd do is, before we start delving into all these other nations, I think, well, this is what I'm going to do. I think what I'm going to do is sort of try and show you how I see the sequence of events running, from pretty much start to finish. Now, this is very, very high level. It's only a few slides to try and show you how I see the sequence working. Now, I'm pretty certain there'll be some of you in this audience that will say, well, I don't quite see the sequence like that. That's fine. There could be different ways of cutting this. However, what I would say is, I think what I'm going to show you holds water from a scriptural point of view. And the reason I say that is because what we're trying to do is mesh together many chapters, aren't we, from a prophecy point of view. It isn't just Ezekiel 38, is it? There's many different chapters, and they've all got to work, and they've all got to synchronise together and work together. And so what I'm going to show you is how I see it syncing, and I absolutely stand behind this as a possibility of the order of things happening. Your order, if you've got a different order, might well still fit, but here's how I think things are going to run through. And once I've shown you this, I think then it's easy to slot in the rest of the nations quite quickly. So here we go with a map of the world. I mean, clearly it isn't the world, but it's a good chunk of it. And the reason I'm showing you this chunk of the world is because predominantly this is the area of the world that God is interested in from a prophecy point of view. Because what God is interested in, of course, are the nations that are impacting Israel. And so, yes, there is big superpower nations like China and so on and so forth, but they're not really mentioned in the scriptures. What we're interested in is this part of the world. So there we go, looking here. But what we're going to do just to start with is to focus right in, and this is the start of the sequence. So I believe that the beginning of the sequence of events actually centres in on Israel, and I think there's going to be an initial conflagration between Israel and the immediate surrounding nations, or I should say possibly as well peoples. I'm talking here about Hezbollah in Lebanon, I'm talking about the Palestinians in Israel, I'm talking about Jordan, I'm talking about Syria. Because you see, there's too many passages in the Bible that talk about there being an issue between Israel and the immediate neighbours that surround it that needs to be brought into play in all of this, in terms of the sequence of events. So I think the sort of chapters that we're looking at that talk about these things would be chapters like Zechariah 12. Zechariah 12 talks about the surrounding countries, the immediate surrounding countries that surround Israel. I think there's chapters like Psalm 83 that list out all of the immediate peoples that live around and about Israel that launch a war on Israel. I think there's chapters like Isaiah 17 that talk about the complete destruction of Syria that comes to an end as a nation, and the total and utter destruction of Damascus, which has not yet happened. Damascus is in a bit of a mess, but suburbs have been destroyed, but the whole city has not been destroyed. That still has to go. Jeremiah 49, and I could go on. There's many chapters that talk about this initial conflagration, and Jerusalem is their sort of major issue. It's a war against Israel's immediate neighbours concerning Jerusalem. But Zechariah 12 tells us in this particular war, Israel wins. Syria loses. In fact, it says that the pricking briars, right, that's what the Bible calls them, pricking briars, those are the nations and people that live round and about Israel that are constantly hurting them and poking them and whatever, they're going to be removed. So successful will Israel's war be against these immediate neighbours that Israel's pricking briars will be removed, and they'll breathe I think they'll be wounded to some extent, but actually they'll breathe a huge sigh of relief that all is now sorted. We have overcome, and Zechariah 12 says exactly that. However, after this war, I don't know all the events in between, and I could speculate, but we haven't got time to do that. But what is certain from Isaiah 17 is that there's a great void that's now left when Syria has completely and utterly been decimated and has failed as a nation entirely, because Damascus has gone. And so there's this great void that's appeared now right there just north of Israel. And I think into this void is where we see the events of Ezekiel 38 come in. So Magog, Meshach and Tubal talking about Russia. Russia heads up an invasion to come into this void and come through into Israel. And the nations that join it are Iran over there, Turkey up there, and Ethiopia and Libya over there in North Africa. And these nations, headed up by Russia, come zooming all the way down and end up, well actually, they end up in Egypt, but we could go through lots of detail, but they come through Israel into Egypt, but end up fundamentally in Israel. Now, the motive of this war, somebody tell me, what's the motive of this war? What's Russia's motive? Spoil. It's nothing to do with religion, this. This isn't a religious war. This is a war about cash. It's about spoil. It's about oil. It's about gas. It's about control of this area. And down Russia comes into this area. Meanwhile, based down here in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and places like that, you try and say it, is who? Who are these nations down here? The flags probably give it away. Britain and America, Tarshish and the Young Lions, based down here. Now you can see why it's King of the North versus South, because here we are here, and here's this great force predominantly coming down from up here. You notice, by the way, I have not included any part of Europe in this war. And I'm going to prove to you, hopefully for the first time, that Europe has nothing whatsoever to do with this stage of the sequence of the war. The European war comes later, and it's not about money, it's not about spoil, it's about religion, and I'll show you about that and why that's the case in a minute. So here's Russia, but as we know from the scriptures, those guys, America and Britain, based down there, really get nowhere, do they? Do they defeat Russia? Do they push Russia out? No. The best they can do is say, what are you playing at? So I've wiped them out. They're just not, they're of zero consequence to some extent. Now, there's Russia sat there in Israel. Somebody tell me what happens at this point. What's the big news that suddenly happens?
Torn from the east.
Yes, and we could say, therefore, it's who arrives on the scene?
Christ.
We know that because in Zechariah 14, who comes into the great big conflict where Jerusalem has been ransacked and ruined, but the Lord Jesus Christ himself, who comes and descends onto where? Mount of Olives. But here's the amazing thing. He's not on his own. Because Zechariah 14 says he comes with the saints. Which means the judgment has happened by this point. It must be. He can't arrive with the saints if the saints haven't been judged, haven't been raised, haven't gone through whatever process, however long it might be. The judgment has already happened at this point. So Christ's initial return, if I can call it that, has already happened. Must have done. Do you agree? So here's Christ. He's now with the saints in Jerusalem, but it isn't the end of the story. Because here is when the Babel side of things kick off. Because what happens now is up here, following, I believe, the collapse of the EU as we sort of know it at the minute of 26 nations. Remember I said last week there'll be a group of 10 that emerge with Germany as its centre. This is a resurrected Holy Roman Empire headed up with the Vatican, the woman, the harlot woman seated on 7 hills in Revelation 17. This now takes place. Now the reason I believe it takes place now and after the return of Christ into Jerusalem is simply because in Revelation 17 the beast and the woman make war against who? The Lamb. And those who are called and chosen and faithful. This, you see, has nothing to do with the previous war. This is a religious war after Christ is established in Jerusalem. And as crazy as that might seem, because we might say, well, surely no. I can't believe that somebody would fight against Christ when he is there in the land. Well, we might have said the same if we lived 2,000 years ago, when people might well have said to us, surely you don't think somebody would kill the Son of God? And they did. So this great beast and woman come down and literally make some sort of attack on Christ and the saints who are there in Jerusalem. And we're told that he overcomes this force. Now this force, of course, this is about a Babel project that we said last week. Remember I said that this is a Babel project. This is about bringing nations back together that God had divided. And so this is a Babel project headed up by the false religion of Babylon. And that is completely destroyed. Now the amazing thing is Revelation talks about them being destroyed. And it says the beast and the woman end up in a lake of fire. Remember that? They're in now a lake of fire. And it turns out they never emerge again. They're gone forever. And Christ's kingdom now kicks off and it now starts expanding and eventually fills the entire world. But you know something? It's not quite the end of the story. And it's this final piece that to me makes everything make sense now. And come and have a look with me, if you would, at Revelation chapter 20. And this is something that we don't often think about, but it answers many, many questions, in my view, as to who the beast, who the false prophet is. It answers who Magog is, who some say is Germany, and so on and so forth. Now, if you have a look in Revelation chapter 20, here's something that happens at the end of the 1,000 millennial rule of Christ. Because we've got Christ now ruling, and he rules for 1,000 years. That's what this chapter says. And in verse 7, it says, when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is of the sand of the sea. Well, well, well. Gog and Magog suddenly back on the scene at the end of the millennial reign of Christ. What happens to Gog and Magog? They went up, in verse 9, on the breach of the earth, and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. Now, here's the thing. Check it out, verse 10. And the devil that deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are. You see, the beast and the false prophet were destroyed when Christ first returned. That was the war when he first got back, the beast and the false prophet, the Vatican and the resurrected Holy Roman Empire. And you know something? They've been there the whole time. They were utterly and totally destroyed. Some have said to me, Andy, I believe Magog is Germany.